Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inventive Marketing Club. In this session, we're going to be looking at why to make your website accessible and how to do it. And I'm joined by Charlotte, who'll be popping on any minute, and she's going to take us through her slides, which I saw at Bath Digital Festival. When was it? End of October, last month. Gosh, the year's running on. And I thought it was really interesting, not only understanding about accessibility and why it's not only our legal responsibility to make sure our websites are accessible, but also to make sure that we can include as many people as possible, because there's a lot of our potential customers who aren't able to use our websites effectively. Right, Charlotte, are you struggling to get online? Let me see if I can bring you in. Just while Charlotte's coming on. So Charlotte is a visual designer and usability expert. Charlotte, do you want to introduce yourself, say hello, and just tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a visual designer, and until recently I was working for an edtech company that made learning apps for children. And as of tomorrow, I will be working for a company that is developing an app for frontline workers. So I specialize in digital design, and I became particularly passionate about that in my last job. And within that, I'm also very interested in designing for accessibility as much as possible.
And you know me, I'm Ben. Hello, I work for Rather Inventive, and I run this club and basically help people with their marketing problems. Now, Charlotte, your presentation I thought was great, because not only... Let me step back a little bit. I find accessibility, when I've heard other people talking about accessibility and making our websites accessible to people with a varying range of disabilities, or abilities, maybe we should say, is that it tends to be pointing the finger and saying you're doing it wrong, you need to do it like this, and there's only one way. Whereas I quite like your approach, that it was more about that you recognize it's hard, it's not something everyone's doing properly, and we should just be moving towards doing it as well as possible, and even little moves towards making an accessible website make a huge difference.
Definitely.
So yeah, it really resounded with me, actually. And there are lots of things you said in terms of design that for websites that I really that should be really helpful in terms of the way we do and design websites. So hopefully we're singing from the same hymn sheet there. Okay, so just a little bit about the club, then I'll hand over to you, Charlotte. So for those of you who are new, this is a club where I present a webinar, or I bring in a guest like Charlotte every single month to give you or present on various different topics on marketing. So this is our 35th, so we've done quite a few already, running for about 3 years. On anything from strategy, social, Google Analytics. Last month I did a WordPress walkthrough where we went through from logging in all the way through to posting an article, video, everything from very high level to detailed. So there's lots of different things in there. If you're not sure, because it's really growing library now, if you want to find something, just email me, Ben at ratherinventive.com, and with what you need, and I'll find it for you. There's also, for those of you like me who like to listen to podcasts, we've got a podcast version of this as well. So I convert every session to audio, so you can listen to it while you're walking the dog or doing the dishes, like I do. Okay, Charlotte, over to you. I'm going to stay on screen and probably bombard with you a few questions as we go through, but it's all yours.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So let me just refer to my notes. You might be wondering how I ended up sort of being interested in accessibility. I actually personally have ADHD and dyspraxia, which makes life interesting. And I've encountered a lot of barriers with tech that I've used in the past, and have just found it frustrating without really understanding why, and without understanding some of the decisions behind the way certain things have been designed. So I actually think that being aware of the barriers that you can face with tech has actually made me a better designer myself. But if it wasn't for my own experiences, I might not have developed an interest in it. I just think that, often you're ignorant of a problem until you or a family or friend have faced it themselves. And in design education, there is a woeful lack of inclusivity. Even in my professional experience, I was given no resources to do the necessary research or testing. And I've had to teach myself all of this in my own time. But I really firmly believe that accessibility should be built in from the start of any design process. And it's not as big a challenge as it seems. A lot of the groundwork has actually already been done for us. It's just a case of knowing where to look for it. And there are so many resources and tools out there, so we're really running out of excuses to not be better at it now. But my personal approach is very much like, do the best you can with the resources that you have. You know, you're never going to get it perfect, and that's okay. But trying and not getting it perfect is far better than not trying at all. So, yeah. I'm also aware, just to say, that some of you will be listening to this and not viewing the slides presentation. Some of you will be viewing it but not able to hear it. So I'm trying to cater for all of these. But if I miss anything, Ben, just let me know, or anyone else can drop comments in the chat, whatever. Cool. Okay. So what is accessible design? Let's just change the slide. Sorry, I've got two screens and my mouse is not very responsive. So, right. I prefer to actually use the term inclusive design over accessible. I feel like it encompasses more diversity. I've used the term accessibility as a starting point because it's something that you're probably all familiar with as a term and as a concept. It refers to how understandable and usable something is by a variety of people. The only sort of limitation with the term accessibility is just that it's quite binary, like disabled, non-disabled. That's how a lot of people kind of view people, like through the lens of that. But I just think there are better ways of thinking about it than just the demographic of disabled or non-disabled or whatever. So with that in mind, I prefer the term inclusive design. So what I'm showing now is a slide that has a little circle with inclusive design in the middle, and then around the outside there are 4 more circles. The top one is usable, the next one is accessible, after that we've got ethical, and after that there's equitable. So they are all kind of like the sub-circles that fit within the bigger inclusive design circle, essentially. And just to explain what they mean, so usable design addresses how someone can use technology efficiently and effectively. Accessible design is about making products and services accessible to all people, but with a focus on any potential impairments, including hearing, motor, cognitive, and vision impairments. Ethical design revolves around protecting and respecting an individual's values, needs, and goals. And equitable design aims at prioritizing design for groups that have been historically underrepresented and addresses diverse identities. And that very lovely definition is from UX Planet, which is a great website if you need to learn about UX or website design stuff. So yeah, that's the way I like to look at these things. And accessible, therefore, is only one part of what makes up this sort of broader concept of inclusivity. The next, sorry, still moving between screens all the time. So my next sort of definition of inclusivity, if you like, is that every design decision has the potential to include or exclude customers. Inclusive design emphasizes user diversity, which covers variations in capabilities, needs, and aspirations. So yeah, just to reaffirm what I said before, I just prefer the term because it encompasses so much more, and it gets you to think about people from so many different perspectives, because it's about preferences as well as abilities and needs and all that kind of thing. So yeah, there's also a fantastic quote from the Inclusive Design Research Centre that I'd like to read you, because this really encapsulates it for me. So we want to stress that the individual is multifaceted, and the constraints or design needs they have may arise from a number of factors or characteristics, and they all need to be taken into account. E.g., I may be blind, but I don't read Braille, and I have some residual vision, so the pictures help me navigate. Or French is my second language, and I'm currently juggling my kids and my job and haven't slept all night, so I'm stressed and a bit distracted. So it's just about being pragmatic more than about looking at it through demographics. The next thing I wanted to cover was Dieter Rams's, I don't know how to pluralize that, 10 Commandments of Good Design. So he is a German industrial designer who made Braun, even a household name in the 1950s. And he has put together 10 commandments of good design, and I think they're a really good starting point. So the slide for this just says useful, innovative, environmentally friendly, aesthetic, understandable, as little design as possible, thorough, unobtrusive, long-lasting, and honest. And the reason I've brought this up is to make the point that good design based on these principles should already be inclusive and accessible, you know, useful, honest, as little design as possible, unobtrusive, understandable. You know, they are very much part of what makes a design inclusive and accessible. But over time, I think, well, over the years, designers have often lost their way a little bit, and they have prioritized things looking flashy or cool or trendy or whatever over sort of how aesthetics can help you achieve good functionality. And that's why these concepts have been developed. So it's about addressing that gap, really. And one of the things that has happened fairly recently is the concept of a needs first approach being adopted in digital design. So we focus on something known as the social model of disability, which defines disability as being caused by the way that surroundings are organized or how services are designed, rather than a person's ability or difference. So what they're saying is someone doesn't start out with a disability, they start out with an impairment, and it only becomes a disability even when that impairment isn't catered for by society. So the needs first approach accounts for permanent, temporary, and situational challenges a problem may face through their lifetime. So I will just show you some diagrams. So
Interesting, actually, from your presentation, it really helps people understand why they need to think about it.
Yeah, so I only discovered this really relatively recently, and it blew my mind. It just made so much sense. And I was like, how do more people not think about it in this way? So the slide that I'm showing at the moment, the heading is Site, and it's got some illustrations of permanent, temporary, and situational examples where site as a sort of need should be considered. So in terms of a permanent site need, you've got someone who's blind. Temporary, you've got someone who wears glasses but is maybe not wearing them at the moment. And then situational, you've got someone who is driving and can't look at their phone properly. They're just glancing at it occasionally, that kind of thing. Then our next one, we have got hearing. So a permanent example of a hearing need is someone who is deaf. So we need to cater for that. Temporary, someone may have an ear infection and not be able to hear very well at the moment. Situational, bartender, so someone who has music on in the background, is shaking a cocktail maker and all that kind of stuff. Then we've got speech. So permanent, someone might be non-verbal. Temporary, someone might have something like laryngitis, have a sore throat, or have lost their voice. Situational, someone might not be a native speaker of a particular language, so struggle to converse. Then we have touch. So permanent, someone may only have one arm or the use of one arm. Temporary, someone might have an arm injury and so they can only use one arm at the moment anyway. And then situational, someone's a new parent and they're carrying their child, or it could just be that someone's got a bunch of shopping that they're carrying in one hand and they've only got like a thumb and their hand to rest their phone on or whatever. So I'm going to show you a really awesome tool in a sec that I know Ben is a big fan of, so we'll go for this in a minute. But yeah, just to say as well, I know this is very app heavy in terms of what I'm talking about. That's just because it's my area of expertise, but we will touch more on like website design stuff further on. So I am going to try and get over my ADHD overwhelm here and share my screen and show you Cards Against Humanity, which is brilliant. Okay, so let's share this. Oh, can you see? Is that all good? Excellent, right. So what I am sharing here is Cards for Humanity which is a brilliant website where you can deal cards, which gives you a person and a trait. And then from there, you can use that as a starting point to work out how you can meet those people's needs. So if we just do an example. So Lucia, 55, is always upbeat and she has dyslexia. So based on that, let's have a look at the way that her being upbeat can affect her needs. So some people might not want to say what's wrong. So you'd think, you know, upbeat is just a personality trait. That's irrelevant to needs or someone's interaction with tech, but it's their approach to everything. So it might impact how they use something. And then you've got to consider as well that some people will always give good feedback. So someone who's upbeat might not say if they're struggling with something, and they might just tell you everything's fine, even if it's not for them. And she also has dyslexia. So let's look at how that can affect her needs. So some fonts are easier to read than others, and large amounts of text can be hard to read and comprehend. Some people use accessibility settings to change how their device displays content to make reading easier. And according to Dyslexia International, 1 in 10 people have dyslexia. So it's very, very common. And a big part of the issue with sort of people being funny about incorporating accessibility into things is, it doesn't affect many of our users. It's not worth us putting the time and effort into designing for it. And that's just complete nonsense. So yeah, and just to check, can you see everything on the screen okay? Because
I can. And it's interesting. What I found most interesting about the cards is not only that it just brings up these situations, but it also gives you facts, which helps you understand that, yes, just because you don't have that problem or people in your team don't have any issues, and there may not be issues, like it's a lot of things here aren't necessarily, you're saying that someone's upbeat and that's not an issue as such. It's not a disability or an impairment, but it can affect the way you interact with them or the communication you have with them.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. And how like the kind of feedback they're likely to give you. So it's about reading between the lines of what people say as well, and kind of anticipating the issues they might face with something, and knowing that, you know, they might be struggling with something, but because they're very positive, they like to frame everything in that way, and they struggle to sort of ask for help. Or they might not know, they might have an issue with something but not know how to articulate it. So like a big part of being a good digital designer is being able to understand things that people aren't saying out loud. So yeah, let's do a few more examples. So Mike is very independent and he's 75, and he's sprained his ankle. So if we look at the independence side of things, well, this is very similar to what we had last time. So some people don't want any help or don't like the idea of receiving help. And Mike has sprained their ankle. So he might not be able to visit a physical location. That's not especially relevant to website design, but it's good to bear in mind. So about 10% of the global population, apparently, according to the World Health Organization, have disabilities, of which 10% require a wheelchair. So yeah,
and that's definitely a temporary impairment, isn't it, where someone's sprained their ankle, and so that will affect them in that moment. And actually for this particular person, well, they're not, you know, if you were to be overly helpful, they might not like that, and that will put them off in this particular case. So it's about reading them and their needs. So it's I've definitely found this with there are some people and some videos I've watched where they say, you know, I'm happy to, I can manage, you know, they have an impairment, and then they say, I can manage. I just need a few things to support me, but I don't need you fussing over me, or I don't need the extra support. I'm happy to browse around, use the technology, go to the shops, do whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
There are certain things I need, but I don't need necessarily help from anyone else.
Definitely. And I think some people are really proud as well, and like their identity can be affected by changes in needs or circumstance. So like, for example, my nan is 87 and she is so independent and extroverted and determined to go out every single day. She's just obsessed with it, and she has started to lose her hearing, but she's too stubborn to wear her hearing aids. So that makes for a lot of fun for everyone. So we're just going to deal another pair of these cards. So Catherine 65 is easily distracted and is not very confident when using a computer. So this is a very relevant example. So let's consider how she's easily distracted. It can be difficult to hold some people's attention. I am a big case of that. It can be challenging for some people to remember key information. I also struggle with that. Some people need more orientation in a process so they know which step they're on. And she's not very confident with using a computer. And I feel like these needs are very much going to coincide with the other ones. Mm-hmm. So some people may have someone helping them use a computer, or they might struggle but not have anyone to help them. And they may be much more comfortable accessing a service via a phone or physical location. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Do you have any other things you can think of, Ben, there, or?
No, I just think this is a very good way, even if you were to maybe just look at it occasionally or when you're going through a process for a site. I certainly might bring this up directly with a few clients just to really get them to think about the different aspects and different people. Because we're generally very selfish. People are very selfish, and we don't think about other people. We cannot possibly think that other people are different from us.
Yeah.
And we think everyone thinks or is the way we are. And that I think that's normal. And it takes a step really to move past that. And it's hard, but it's so crucial. Even if you're able just to accommodate a few more people every time, just by thinking about it, makes such a huge difference. And however small, and I come across it with certainly with Zoom. I've got a wide variety of clients, and just it's easy for me to send a Zoom link. I can send a Zoom link in an email. And many people are absolutely fine with that because they've used Zoom before. Some people are not confident, but they are actually very capable of doing it. They just haven't used it before. And some people, just because of another setup or another anxiety they have using a computer, it's just something they don't even want to deal with. So you have to have another way, use something they're more comfortable with, like the phone or just meeting them in person. I've definitely had that with clients before.
Definitely. Cool. So if we have to think about the design process then, I've got a nice diagram here from the Nielsen Norman Group, which is like probably the most well-known and respected institution for UX and UI design, which is basically digital design, and encompasses a lot of website design principles as well.
You go on. Could you just tell people what UX and UI means?
Yeah. So I tried to use it interchangeably with digital design because that's more self-explanatory, but UX means user experience, and UI means user interface. So a lot of people associate UX and UI design with apps predominantly. But when you think about what UX and UI actually are, it also completely applies to websites. So it's user experience is obviously about designing like the user journey, making sure that it's like the steps that you're going through on an app or a website are clear. And basically just that the user is able to get to their goal easily. And then with user interface, that's more like the surface stuff. So it's how you're actually interacting with the website. It's the buttons, it's the text, it's how that stuff is displayed in a visual way, an auditory way. When I was doing UI design for the learning apps for children in my last job, UI design for me at least encompassed buttons, typography, colors, design of question screens, auditory feedback, sensory feedback, like haptic feedback, so vibration and stuff like that. And I was also designing for web browsers, tablets, and phones, which was challenging, let's say. So in any design process, I think this applies to even like product design, industrial design, but especially digital. There are a few kind of stages to it. So if you can see this diagram, don't worry, you don't need to understand all of it, but I'll just give you an overview. So first of all, you want to understand. And in the understanding phase, you've got two stages. There's empathize and define. So you want to try and understand your users as the absolute starting point. So if you are trying to consider accessibility from the start of your design process, the empathize part is where you will be talking to users and finding out what they need and how they're likely to interact with things. Define is where you build on what you've learned from the empathize stage, and you really develop a set of goals and plan what you're going to do with your design. Then you've got the explore phase, which is about coming up with your initial ideas and thoughts on how, like, I guess this is quite collaborative. You work with developers and the rest of your design team to come up with how you're going to meet those needs that you established in the understand phase. So within the explore phase, you would ideate, so you'd come up with those initial ideas, and then you'd prototype, so like the first kind of wireframes and testing and that kind of thing. Then you have got the materialize phase, and then within that you would test and implement. And just to reiterate as well, there's lots of arrows on this diagram, and the idea is to show that between each stage, it should be really iterative. So if you haven't got all your answers in the empathize phase and you go into the define stage, you might be like, do you know what? I'm just going to go back to the empathize stage, consult more users because I've realized that I don't understand the needs of these particular people, or I might not understand what happens if I do this. And that should happen at every stage of the process. You don't have to be afraid of going back a stage and then jumping back forward. And it should just be back and forth, very iterative. You don't want to be going back and forth all the time, obviously, and you should kind of keep that to a minimum as much as possible. But the point is that you should never see it as a linear thing and be like, right, I've done that stage now, it's completely like solid. I'm not going to go back and do any of that. If you need to, you need to, so it's fine.
People watching this might think, well, but how does that apply to just a business website?
Yeah.
And I would say, just coming back to something you said about UX or user experience, is it's defining and helping people achieve that goal. So it's about the functionality, really, how people achieve that goal. And I would say that on a business website, people still have goals.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of business owners think about it from their perspective. I'm putting up a website because I want to present information about the company. But I think they should flip that perspective around and say, we're putting up a website to help our customers find out more information about us and to contact us more easily, or to buy from us, or whatever the goals might be. So this process is exactly the same for that when you're designing a website.
Yeah.
To understand the customer, know what their pains are, how you can help them, what you need to do to help them.
Yeah.
And then start going through ideas of how you're going to do that, and eventually testing and implementing. And even prototyping. Sometimes it's about, well, let's just try different text on the screen and see what works, and go back to a few people that we know and see whether that's better for them before we actually send an email out to everyone or roll it out properly.
Yeah.
And I think that works just for a consumer website or a commercial website as much as it does for an app.
Yeah, definitely. And within the empathize stage, you'll be looking at users' pain points, which is things that you've established that people get really frustrated by or really struggle with. And then there's also the concept of a mental model, which is essentially the pre-existing associations people have with, for example, you've got red and green as like a destructive action or an affirmative action. So like you go through to the next stage as a green button, or you want to cancel and it's a red button, things like that people already expect. They're already established in their heads. So what you don't want to do, bearing in mind that mental model, is then have like a cancel button that's green, for example. That's going to confuse a lot of people. So it's about anticipating, predicting, really empathizing and understanding where people are coming from, what they've already been exposed to, how they're going to expect something to behave. And also, going back to this diagram, there's a big arrow from the implement stage all the way back to the start of the process, which is the empathize stage. And that's just, I guess, what that's referring to is the fact that you've got versions of stuff, right? So you might implement the thing or release the app, and then you get people's feedback based on that app version or website version, whatever it is. And then you're like, cool, okay, in a month or so, I will aim to restart the process. I'll go back to users, I'll find out what they want, and then it will just happen again, and then you can release version 2 or whatever. But yeah, when you are designing within those versions, just, yeah, it should all be iterative. So I have got some case studies to show you. I don't know how much time we're going to have to go through them properly, but I will. Based on the last time I went through these, Ben, which one do you think I should prioritize? Color blindness, maybe?
I'm trying to think, what was the one where you had a really crazy site? There was just so much going on.
That was the color blindness, and it was grim. I would love to share that.
It was intense.
Oh yeah. Okay, I will share that tab. Bear with me. This like whole setup is a nightmare for my ADHD and dyspraxia. It's just like all over the place. Right. Okay.
What you mean? You mean the Demio setup? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not Demio. It's more just like, oh, there are some people who can hear and not see. Some people who can see and not hear. And oh my god, there's so much.
You know what? I've made a note that, and I'm trying to be aware of this, but I must read out the slides more when I'm going through this process, because I do tend to, but not always.
Yeah, so it's really ironic that I am a big advocate for accessibility, but I always forget that there are people who don't interact with the world in the same way that I do, and then I just sound like a massive hypocrite. So that's fun. So I am going to show you some examples from a website that I came across recently, which is deeply upsetting. I'm going to be sort of describing what's on screen, so sorry if you can't see this, but how, for the people that can't see this, Ben, how would you describe these screenshots?
Okay, so we're looking at ones on the left hand side.
Yeah, but just
regular mode.
Yeah.
So when I saw this site, so during your presentation, you actually brought the site up and we could see it, and I found it very colourful. It's really nice and colourful. It's using lots of patterns. The colours are very purple and yellow. They're quite pastel-y, really. And it's for I was distracted. I couldn't quite work out what they did. Just in the text, it didn't make quite sense really as to what the website or the group actually did. So just from a textual point of view, it didn't make sense. And then the colors were really distracting with lots of patterns. So my eye was drawn around all over the place. Yeah. And normally I want to have something moving or patterns to draw the eye, but not too much, because otherwise it does look, there's something interesting about it. I can definitely see why they did it, but it feels wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's visually busy, very busy.
I think they've tried to go for this kind of funky, like 70s or 60s inspired, like we're all happy and loving and one people. I don't know.
Definitely has that vibe to it. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. So this is the Unitarians website. I'm so sorry. I am not trying to criticize them. It's just a really good example of a lot of problems all at once. So the one I'm showing at the moment, so this little frame here, this is the non-colorblind friendly version. Not that the colorblind version is colorblind friendly, but I'll explain that in a second. So this is the homepage of the website. So when you open it up, this is what you go to. And then I put it through like a generator that shows how someone with a particular kind of color blindness would see that. And immediately you can see so I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see that, Ben?
Yeah.
Cool.
You're moving across the menu.
That's the one. Yeah. So if you look at the nav bar, there's literally no contrast there. Like this is like a sort of, the text is like a tealy color, and then the background is like an ever so slightly darker tealy color. So you can't really see what the text is on the nav bar. And it sort of makes your eyes hurt because you're sort of squinting to try and
That's right. You can see something there, but it's so faint, very difficult to read.
Exactly. And then there's also a lot of like pinky red combined with that teal color, and that is a particularly harsh combination. So there was a designer called Joseph Albers, and he wrote an amazing book on color theory. And this is the sort of combination that in his book he described as like making your eyes vibrate. It's like really buzzy. It's horrible. It
Yeah.
just makes you feel a bit ill. And then you've got the cookie notification at the bottom of this. And again, the background's like a sort of pinky color, and then you've got that teal text color and an OK button on the top, which you can barely see. So it's just really horrible. So then I also noticed that on their website they have this sort of, where is it? Actually, no, I'll show you that in a minute. There's also simple view mode, which doesn't really make anything better, but I'll go through that in a sec.
It doesn't, it like takes off the pattern or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So
really help.
I also took a screenshot of what happens when you hover over the hyperlink in the top section. So if I go back up, you can see this sort of blue underlined text here is a hyperlink. And then, yeah, when you hover over it, it goes to this this green color to show that you're hovering over it. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Like there should be a hover state for any sort of interactive element. So that's great. But it's just that it's now like bright green on a pink background, which is horrendous.
You can't read it. They've obviously got this color palette that just doesn't work well in almost any combination.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful color palette. The individual colors are lovely, and some of the combinations are nice, but it's been implemented in a way that, you know, for me as someone without any of these visual processing issues, I find it makes me feel seasick.
Yeah.
Let alone if you are someone who struggles with color contrast and that kind of thing. So what I mentioned before about their quote unquote accessible mode, which is called simple view. If you click on that, it basically just gets rid of the backgrounds, but the colors stay exactly the same. So it's not really helped anything. So yeah,
it improved the menu a little bit, didn't it? It improved the menu, so the menu becomes legible.
Yeah,
but
so
some of the colors aren't actually just as bad. You've got a pink, a light green on a salmon pink.
Yes,
that
exactly.
still isn't visible. So
if we look at that again through the particular kind of color blindness called tritanopia, I don't know if that's the correct way to pronounce it, you've then still got that horrible teal with the salmony background color, and it just makes your eyes hurt. It's improved in the sense that, yeah, like you said, Ben, you can now see the text on the nav bar, but it's still not pleasant. So its effect is kind of limited there. What else have we got in terms of examples? Oh yeah, this one's pretty grim. Like this, oh, that's no. I just feel ill looking at that. I don't know about you.
So what's happened with this one? What's the difference with this?
So this is a different page.
Okay.
It's
a subsection of the website.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is me actually hovering over who we are, and then like a little sub menus come up. So who we
that's
are,
right. And the sub menu looks like it's part of the main menu.
Exactly, because there's no differentiation there. It's not. Yeah. There's nothing saying this is the main menu, this is the sub menu. It all looks the same, and it looks like the main menu has like malfunctioned and been offset beneath it. And then you've got this really horrendous pattern in the background, which just makes you feel ill to look at. Yeah, so it's very much the same kind of around that website. There's just too much going on.
So you've run it through a filter for color blindness. How did you do that?
Oh, that is an excellent point. I will refer people to various links at the end, but I will try and do it for you now. So let's just take these two colors as an example.
So you've picked a blue and a green.
Yep. So on Figma, which is what I'm in at the moment, that's how I'm showing all these screenshots and stuff. Figma is the dream. So we've got plugins, and I have a bunch of accessibility plugins. So we've got Colorblind, we've got HCL Color, we've got Stark, which is fantastic. I think I used Colorblind potentially for this. Let me see. So what Colorblind, the plugin, does is you can select all the kinds of color blindness you want to see for a particular color combination. So if you then go and create views, it will duplicate them oh, it's done it a bit funny in terms of the way it's been formatted, sorry, but you get the idea. So
Yeah.
it's like this. And then if you select the frame, I don't know if you can see on the left here, it labels with the kind of color blindness view that you're looking at, which is fantastic.
For
So,
each object, yeah.
exactly. So it gives you a really clear example of what it is you're looking at.
So this is great. This is built into a design package that a lot of people use for apps and web development. So you can do
Exactly
your
that.
testing before you've actually made anything live.
Yeah, and Stark is amazing as well. So Stark has a vision simulator, a contrast checker, a focus order, which is incredible. So that's especially helpful if people are using screen readers where they need to like tab through all of the elements. Yeah, Stark is just, oh, I love it. So there are so many good tools. We have no excuse, and it takes 2 seconds to like run that plugin, as you saw, and just gives you an example of whether or not something's going to look good. Not even good, but just usable. And you know, I've also shown Spotify here. So on their main page, generally Spotify are great, but on their landing page, if you are someone with tritanopia, the blue-green color combination is very difficult to look at. There's just not enough contrast really to discern the information. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got this green text on the blue background, and then when it runs through the tritanopia filter, it's they're very similar colors. One's a sort of darker, a teal, lighter teal, and it's hard work, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes against the whole thing of like, don't make your users put effort into interacting with your product or your website. Like, they're there because they want something from you. They owe you nothing at this point. They don't want to have to put effort in, and they're just going to be annoyed if something is jarring or makes them have to really work to achieve the information. Like, they don't even know that you necessarily have the information or product that they want at this point. It's your job to convince them of that. So if they're faced with all these barriers without even knowing that what you have is for them, they're just going to be like, cool, I'm not going to bother. I'll look at a competitor website instead. So it's just really important for your, you know, the people engaging with your business. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I must admit, while we do try and focus on the legibility of text and also focusing on the function of a site more so than the design and that end user goal, looking at color blindness is not something I generally do. I try and avoid colors that might be lower contrast anyway. In some cases, you might not know the ultimate effect, so running it through some kind of tool is worth doing. Yeah,
definitely. So, I mean, I just want to clarify as well. It's something that I get wrong all the time. And I'm starting a job tomorrow where I've had a look at their brand palette, and their main brand color, which I don't know if I can change, it doesn't look nice or particularly good with black text. It's sort of like a medium green. So it's not quite right with white text over it, and it's not quite right with black text over it. So I'm not sure how I'm going to get around that. So you're constantly faced with all these things. But again, I'm going to reiterate at this point that, you know, just having awareness of it as an issue is the first stage to doing something about it. And even if you don't end up doing something about it, it might be that you provide an alternative means of someone getting to that content in a way that is more usable for them. So yeah, it can only be a good thing if you're aware of these things. Do you reckon we've got time for another example? So I could either do the. What do you reckon?
I don't know. I think we might have to move on because you've got some other good stuff to share. Shall I bring back up slides? Yeah, I don't think we do, sadly. But can I maybe send some screenshots or images?
Absolutely. And I've also got, what I've done on the Figma files is I've got comments where I've like annotated the designs and said like what's kind of wrong with them or not right with them at least in various areas. So yeah, you can do that. So then if we move on, I have got some top tips for you based on my personal experience. So the first one would be multiple modes of differentiation. And I will provide some examples in a second. So hyperlinks, very important. CTAs, obviously, like
Call to
CTA
actions.
buttons, yeah. Sorry, call to action buttons, yeah. Also very important, but I'm just showing you a hyperlink here because this is what you'll be used to seeing. So on this slide, I've just got examples of what it looks like if you have the text I am a body and sorry I am body I am a body I am a body text and I am a hyperlink, and the first example just shows that it's all in the same color, it's all in the same weight, all in the same formatting. There's nothing differentiating the body text from the hyperlink. Then we've got the I am a hyperlink in blue, whereas the rest of it is in black. So that's one way of differentiating it. But what if someone is colorblind and they can't really differentiate between the blue and the black? That's not helping them see that the hyperlink is different from the rest of the text. So that's why hyperlinks ended up being a different color from the main text and having an underline. And it seems to have become more popular in recent years to get rid of the underline because it does look neater when it's without it. But I still am quite insistent on putting an underline.
I push for it too, yeah.
It's just what people are used to at this point, and it's just considerate to build in that extra way of discerning that information. So yeah, I prefer it.
The worst culprits I've seen is where they have a hyperlink, but there's no underline, and the text is actually lighter than the main text. So not only can you hardly not see it, but it's actually lighter than the main body text anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that.
Yeah,
it's quite useful if you want to hide links for SEO purposes. But apart from that, if you actually want to link in, people should know it's there.
Definitely. And another one, like one of my massive bugbears, is when a hyperlink or a button is grey and it's not disabled. Like we are so used to seeing inactive or disabled buttons as grey that when you have a button that is grey that is not disabled, you don't feel like you can click it because you're just instinctively like, well, when I hover over that, it's just going to have the regular cursor. It's not going to have the pointy hand. It's not going to take me anywhere. But yeah, some of the time it's normally like a cancel button or like a go back button. But because it's grey and it doesn't look disabled, you don't think that you can press it. So you think that something like the website's frozen or it's gone wrong, or like you can't get out of what you're in. And it's just very frustrating. And then this is another example of multiple modes of differentiation. So this is something that came up for me in my design of educational apps. So we would often find that children couldn't always differentiate between the colors. So if we were separating something by color, like saying like move the blue square to where the pink square is or something, they might not understand the difference between them and know which is the blue one and which is the pink one. So for that reason, we started introducing pattern overlays on top of the colors, because that way, even if they can't distinguish blue from pink, they might be able to distinguish stripes from dots, for example. So it's just several different layers of discernibility that gives them a better chance of being able to distinguish them from each other. So yeah, that's something to consider. The next one we've got is clear visual hierarchy. This is a huge one for websites. So this slide is just showing an example of what type looks like without any visual hierarchy, and then what it looks like with visual hierarchy. And what I mean by that is, or the way that hierarchy has been achieved in the correct example is by making the header text bigger and bolder than the body text. And then we've got a subtitle beneath that, which is orange, so that's a different color, and bigger as well than the body text, but it's smaller than the header text. So you know that it's not as important as the header text, but it's more important than the body text, or kind of leads you into the body text. Then you've got the main body text paragraph, and then beneath that we've got a call to action, which is in orange, which is the same color as the subtitle, which is nice because then you sort of can already see that there's a design pattern going on. There's a brand there, and a sense of consistency. Technically speaking, I don't think the white on that sort of yellowy orange is quite up to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standards. So I'm just going to put that out there now, but at least it's fairly visible, and it's clear. You know that it's a button. It looks like a button. Everything's left aligned, and it's in the place that you would expect a button to be, because if you think about a call to action button, it's a conclusion to the information you've just been presented with. So it's like here are the reasons you should use our product, go and buy our product or sign up or whatever. So that's I think, yeah, looking at your call to action button as like the kind of final stage of an interaction process and a conclusion to the argument that has just been made as to why you should be using the product or whatever is a good way to look at it.
It is.
I
And
mentioned,
also, so I was just going to say about visual scanning as well, because having headings that stand out allows people just to skim the page to help them find the information they want, make sure they're on the right page, so they don't feel they have to need to invest time if it's not the right page for them. And I think that's more likely to help people spend more time checking out your page than if it's just a wall of text, which looks like hard work. It's difficult to skim, however good that text is. Yeah,
exactly. It comes back to that thing of like not making people invest when they don't know if they even want to at this point, because they haven't read the information yet. It's the point before they read the information. And you have such a limited time to actually get people on board and get them to commit to going through your site and whatever. So having this initial visual impact and like at a glance overview is super important. I also mentioned the web content accessibility guidelines there, which is a really, really fundamental thing to be aware of as if you're designing a website. So there are a set of guidelines that were developed by the W3 Consortium. Is that what they're called?
World Wide Web Consortium?
Yeah, that's the one. And I believe Tim Berners-Lee is behind that originally.
Yeah, I think he's something to do with it.
Yeah, and they have some brilliant guidelines that outline exactly how you should be making your websites accessible. I think it's you're legally bound to actually meet these guidelines as much as possible. And there are different stages, like different extents to which you can meet those guidelines. So there's A, which is like you meet it on a basic level, double A, which is like you're doing a pretty good job, and then AAA, which is like absolute standout examples of accessibility. And yeah, like the correct color contrast is there, text sizes, etc. So I really recommend checking those out.
And they do have they do have their almost a checklist. The problem is you can't. It's difficult to automate it. So some of it is subjective. And so it's hard, but it's still worth looking at. And just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means we should try and move towards it. And actually, it will. I don't know if you haven't said it yet, but I think generally speaking, if you can make it work for more people, it's going to make it easier for everyone. So if you can make it easier to read for more people, that will make it easier to read for everyone, even people that don't have any issue.
And just more pleasant. It's not even just about ease. It's about just like something nice to look at. So in terms of the different, the extent to which you can meet the guidelines, I in my last job aimed for AA because we were designing for children and a huge variety of ages, and they like lots of bright and engaging features. And so it didn't feel like AAA was achievable without compromising on what we were trying to do with the product. So you can bear in mind your needs in this as well. And, even if you don't meet the criteria that you're aiming for, trying is better than not trying, which is what I always come back to. So let's go on to the next slide. So clear order. So we've touched on this a bit already. This diagram here shows a little kind of arrow in the shape of a Z, which shows one way that users kind of pass information that they're looking at on a web page. So yeah, we've touched on this already, but they will usually start in the top left corner of the page or the screen, which is usually like your logo or some sort of something that says what your website is. Then they will move across to the top right. Then from the top right, they'll go diagonally down to bottom left. And then from there, they'll go straight across to the bottom right. And that's where you might see like a next button or a sign up button, your CTA, whatever. So looking at different ways that people pass information visually is a really good place to start when you're trying to lay out your website and figure out what needs to go where. And I would also encourage you to think about information architecture. So what is it you're trying to achieve? And if you think about it as though you're writing an essay, for example, and I say this as someone who did history as my first degree, so this is a bit academic, but you've got your introduction, you've got your main argument, and then you've got your conclusion. And if you think about the information that you're trying to lay out on your website, you've got, this is who we are, that's the introduction. You've got the main content, which is, this is why you should use our product, or come stay at our hotel, or whatever. And then you've got the conclusion, which is, this is how you do it, click here. That reminds me, never use click here on a button. Just while I think of it. One kind of fundamental thing that annoys me when I'm on a website is if someone's telling me to click a button, like click here, but I don't know what the button's going to take me to. So why am I just going to click it just because you've told me to click it? And for people with conditions or neurodivergence like autism, they're going to really struggle, not always, but they might struggle with the fact that it's not clear what they should be doing, and they don't understand why they should click, and it's just quite jarring as an experience. So that's a bit of a tangent, but yes, that bugs me. So, right. Next, we have readable text, my favorite thing. So you should be using a clear, readable font. And what constitutes a clear, readable font? You can find that in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines as well, also abbreviated to WCAG or WCAG, just in case you hear that term. So there are different standards of what constitutes readable depending on the color used, the size, the weight of the font, and that kind of thing. You have different standards for different sizes. So with bigger text sizes, you can get away with more, and you can get away with like lower color contrast because you've got the fact that the text is larger, which kind of compensates for it. So that's something to bear in mind. You should have a sufficient text to background color contrast ratio. The text size needs to be big enough, but also not too big, because that is also going to be jarring. So a lot of this is kind of Goldilocks stuff. It's not too big, not too small, not too bright, not too dull, and that can be very subjective and very hard to judge. But again, this is where you refer to that secondary research, the people that have already done that work for you. So the NN group, World Wide Web Consortium, all of those people have done wonderful things. And obviously, like I showed you, you've got the plugins on Figma. You've got so many extensions on browsers now as well that can go through what's in front of you on the screen and like tell you how compliant it is, give you advice on what you can change and what you can improve. So we have no excuse, basically. And going back to the readable text, I would aim for about 50 to 60 characters per line, just because any shorter and your eye is jumping around a lot between the lines. Any longer and your eye could just kind of tire over the course of a line. And by the time you're at for example, if you're reading left to right, by the time you're at the right-hand side of the screen, but it's a really long line, you can then try to go back to the following line and start at the left-hand side of the screen. You can lose which line you're meant to be reading next.
This is a big issue I've had with websites and customers' sites in terms of reducing that, because they want a nice wide site. But then when you put text on it and it fills the whole width of the site, so you either have to bring that text in or put an image to the right or make it larger so it reduces the characters per line.
Exactly.
It's quite tough because it not only makes it difficult to read, it makes you not want to read it because it looks like hard work without even thinking about it.
Exactly. And it's these unconscious judgments that we make when we first see something that inform how we then go on to interact with it. So it's so important to get that first impression right. What I tend to do actually, when I was making my own website, I set the text box size to be responsive, but to be a maximum, I think, of 70% of the screen width or the viewport width. I think I did 60 actually, because it's on a big screen. You're just never going to want to read that much text in one go. But actually, what I used Editor X for my personal website, which is really good, and you can design for different viewport sizes. So I set the width at like 60 for a wide screen, and then for tablets I think I set it to 80, and then mobile to 90. So it's about designing for different devices, but also, yeah, bearing in mind the needs that we're discussing now.
It just shows how important testing is. So just testing it, not just taking the design's word for it, but making sure you test it and you ask your friends and family and customers to test it. And there are even services, I think it's usability.com we've used before, where you can pay to get just random people. I mean, they are random people, but you can filter down the different types of people, and they'll test the site for you. They'll go and perform a list of actions. So if you really don't know and you want more information, you can just put it out there to get other people to look at your site.
Exactly. Even if you just, show it to friends and family, they're all going to have different experiences, different needs, different preferences. So even if someone, you don't see them as having like issues interacting with something or whatever, they're still good to test on. It's still a good starting point. So other readable text sort of things to consider. Don't embed text in an image. It's just really bad practice. Not only can that image distort and get pixelated so you can't read what's on it, but also it's terrible for people with any visual impairment that needs them to use makes them need to use a screen reader, because the screen reader can't, at least not at the moment, I don't think the technology is there yet, it can't, generally speaking, detect the text in an image. It really struggles with that. And also you've then not got any information about the hierarchy of the text. So you may or may not know, like whoever's watching or listening to this, that you set like H1, H2, H3 tags when you're writing the code behind the website.
I do try and instill that into them to make sure they know what tag they're using.
Yeah, so that helps because it establishes an order for screen readers, and they'll read out like before they read the main header, for example, they'll say header 1, and then it will tell you, and the person using the screen reader will know that header 1 is like the main title. I think it actually might be called title, and then header 2, header 3. So they know like the structure of the page from that. So that's another reason it's important not to embed text in an image. Along those lines, also try to avoid using a text overlay on top of an image, because even if you're using the like actual text and it's therefore it can interact with screen readers, it's still quite hard when you've got a busy background, like we saw in the example I showed earlier. When you've got text over the top and you've got a pattern or a busy image behind it, it's just hard to read that text then.
It's very common as well, actually. Very common.
It's so fashionable at the moment to do it, and it's like I can see why, but it's just not. It's just not done well in a lot of instances. So just I would avoid it if you can. And then the other thing is left align long chunks of text or bullet points. I don't know if you've ever seen center aligned bullet points, but they're grim. Your eye just dances around and you're just like, where am I looking? What is this? It just isn't what you have in mind when you think of a list. And center aligned long chunks of text are, again, your eye dances around. It's hard to know when the next line starts and where it is, and just avoid it if you can. But I fully acknowledge that this is so tricky. Like, so much of it is a balancing act. There's no perfect answer a lot of the time. It's just doing the best you can. But as I keep saying, like, that's better than not trying at all.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at what's next. So consistency. Design systems are a fantastic way of establishing consistency. So it's like brand guidelines. What do you work with, Ben, normally when you're designing websites?
What, from that customers provide to us?
No, more like
very little in that case.
More like when you're designing the site. How do you have a system of some kind where you're like, okay, this particular kind of button is going to look like this. This is what this.
So we'll start with some defaults. We actually start with a wireframe. So we use WordPress for everything, and we use our own theme, which is very basic. It's got the bare bones basic. And we start putting in content first and then start designing around that. And have to resist the customer wanting to put in design too early, and me sometimes. And it's about making sure we've got the hierarchy, the content, the call to action, everything is in its place. and then start designing. So from that point, we've got the ability to set what color links are, what color titles are, and so on. So that gives you a basic color scheme and a layout. And then from there, you adapt it to fit, because sometimes you want a bigger button for something. Or you need to change the color of the button, or you need maybe a certain header that is a H2, which is always this style generally. Actually, we need to change that in this instance. So once you've got everything right, it's then about exceptions and looking through the page and saying, what do we need to make exceptions for? So that's our system in a way.
That sounds pretty legit to me. That's I'm very, very much a content first person. Like, even if you have some brand assets that are already established and you know like what colors you're going to be using, the general shape of your buttons and stuff, ignore that until you've got all the content together, until you've established your information architecture, you've got the structure of the page. Wireframe it in black and white or grayscale so you don't get distracted by colors, but you've got a general idea of like position, layout, all that stuff. And then start applying the colors that you've either already established or are coming up with in response to the content that you've got. But you should be always kind of like working out what, so say you've got like your next button, you're always going to want your next buttons to look the same or have something unifying them in terms of their design, so that people know what a next button is going to look like in your system. So
exactly. And also not having too many buttons. So not using buttons for everything, because then it becomes distracting and you have to think about which to click on. I mean, you are leading your visitor a little bit. And some people can call that, can use that for bad design patterns, where they'll lead you down a positive path for them rather than giving you a true choice.
It's really cheap.
But and that's bad. And you see that in cookie pop-ups and newsletter sign-ups. But I still think that you still want to reduce the amount of buttons and visual clutter on the page, and even links, so you're not distracting people. So you are funneling them through, but you're still giving them choice.
You don't want to give them too many choices, because then they're just going to be paralyzed in the face of it. Like, they're not going to know what to do. You want to make it, without being patronizing, you want to be as clear as possible about the journey that you want them to take, and the next actions that you want them to take.
Yes, but not stop them taking other actions. Just make a clear pathway through to where you believe the information they need is the action they want to achieve.
Exactly.
There's a good book, which I was going to try and grab, that a friend of mine, Catherine Every, who's a copywriter, recommended, called Content Design. And it's about a woman who worked for the government when they were redoing all of their content and visual look, so that everything is trying to focus on that goal. What are people trying to achieve, and can we get cut straight to it as quickly as possible? I don't think they've always achieved that, but generally speaking, there's lots of good advice. I'll try and find the book and put a link in the notes for this.
Yep, definitely. Cool. So, personal information. This is a big one. This is less sort of user interface design, more user experience design, I guess. If you don't need to know something, don't ask. It's about asking the right thing at the right time, in the right way. So if you need to capture personal information like sex, title, race and ethnicity, gender identity, all that kind of stuff, just be mindful of how you're doing it. Provide plenty of options. Avoid stereotypes. And if you're not sure what options to provide, maybe provide a text box where people can fill out the information themselves. Just let them write it, because it's just respectful at the end of the day. And why ask someone's title if you don't need to know how to address them? Why ask their gender if that doesn't influence their interaction with the product at all? It's just an unnecessary step they have to take. It can be really jarring. Like say you've got someone who is trans and is going through transitioning, like being asked their gender without actually that information being needed is just another thing that's going to maybe remind them of something that they're struggling with at the moment, and just bring up stuff that they weren't wanting to think about. So yeah, it's just being respectful and mindful of that stuff.
And I think also, if you don't need to ask the question, don't, because you will be wasting people's time. Because, and the more, usually I find the more questions are on the form, the fewer form fills you're going to get. So if your
Yeah.
aim is to get lots of people filling out the form, reduce it to only the stuff you need at that stage. You can always take it later if they phone up, or you phone them back, or you might have a multi-stage data collection process where you can get it when you need it, rather than just saying, well, let's get all up front and then we can deal with it later.
Yeah.
No, because most people don't. It gets chucked into their CRM or their back-end database, and they never use it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so pointless.
And it becomes a GDPR issue then as well.
So true. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, definitely. So in terms of interaction, provide various modes of feedback. So sensory or haptic feedback if you can. Well, I suppose it's not really relevant for websites, but it's certainly a thing for apps. Auditory feedback, again, more app related, and visual feedback. So yeah, don't use jarring sounds though, because that's just upsetting. Again, not really relevant to websites, but I don't know, just it's.
I mean, it's a bit more difficult now. Browsers tend to stop it, but it used to be autoplay videos with audio. So you'd load a page, and suddenly the video is autoplaying and it's blaring away.
That's so true.
That's not great. I mean, that tends to be stopped now, but you can still achieve it if you really want to. And it's people who are the creators forcing their will on the user, and that's not something I like.
No, exactly. And autoplay videos drive me insane. It's just disrespectful, I feel like. I can't really think of any other way of explaining it. And autoplay with sound is even worse. It's just like you're just being almost like you're being violated. It's like I didn't ask for that. I didn't want that to happen. Now I've got all this stuff in my face and in my ears, and make it go away. It's horrible. So moving on to some more tips. Make the steps as clear as possible. This comes back to hierarchy, so visual hierarchy, but also information architecture and structure. Like we've discussed, make it clear the journey that the user needs to go on, and think about how best they're going to achieve it. Provide alternative formats. So if you're not sure, for example, like how to make text big enough for people with visual impairments, maybe link them to the raw text in a document like Google Docs or something. And that way they can apply their own assistive technology preferences to it. So because, a lot of people with additional needs like that, they're going to have their own assistive technology in place and set up already, and in a way that they feel comfortable with. So rather than you trying to second guess how they like to use things or interact with things, maybe just link them to something that they can put through their own tech. That just something to consider. I've put here some good examples of inclusivity in design. In terms of websites, so we've got the NHS website and the government website. They are both absolutely fantastic. Not generally holding up the government as an example of how to treat people with disabilities at all, but I will say their design system is utterly fantastic and has been developed with really, really good principles in mind. The BBC can be very good as well. I think when their design system's implemented, it doesn't always work how it should, but they've got like what's known as a global experience language or something. It's their design system essentially that incorporates inclusivity as a concept, and it's accessibility and that kind of thing, and it's really, really well done, but it's not always executed as it perhaps should be. So I would recommend going on those websites to have a look at how they do it. So key takeaways then. Sorry, we've gone quite a bit over here, but
whip through these.
We'll do. So make other people aware of how they can do their part to improve inclusivity. Pretty self-explanatory. What else do we have? Call out companies or individuals who are not meeting necessary standards. It's not about being rude about it or being aggressive. It's just being like, do you know what? This I found really hard to interact with. And especially, if you can be quite solution focused about it and say, this is a thing I've struggled with. What would be great is if you could blah, 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 because that way they're not going to be as defensive. They're not going to take it as personally. They're going to see it as a problem that needs solving. And if you can then make their lives easier by suggesting how they might be able to solve it for you, they're more likely to be willing to do that. So, but it's also just making people aware of people with additional needs, or like, you know, as designers and developers, we can fall into the trap of assuming that everyone experiences the world like we do, when that's just not the case. So we just need reminding, and that's okay. So listen to those with lived experience, be it in terms of additional needs or belonging to a marginalized group. They will be key to making your designs as accessible as possible. Don't make assumptions. Research and test with users.
Too easy to do that.
Absolutely is. Ask yourself who you are willing to actively exclude. That can be a good starting point. So exclusion isn't necessarily a bad thing. So, for example, with the apps that I used to make for children, it was, you know, we could at the very first stage exclude, I don't know, like 80-year-olds from from our design process, because it was very unlikely that any elderly people would be using the products, because they're designed as learning apps for children. So it can help you focus your attention to the needs of those that you are designing for. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but also bear in mind that if you have not considered the needs of a particular person or group when you're designing, that is as good as you saying this product is not for you, or your needs were not worth my time or effort to design for. So if you think about it in that sense, it can make it, I guess, make it clearer that you should be considering this stuff. Sorry for the uncouth language here. You can't polish a turd. My point here is that you should be thinking about this throughout the process. It's going to make your life so hard if you haven't thought about it. You've implemented your design or released or whatever, and then you realize that it doesn't cater for a particular need or impairment, and then you have to go back and build it in. It's so hard to do that. Like trying to work that in as an afterthought. Firstly, it's disrespectful to the people with those needs, and also it's just so hard on a practical level to do that, because it might involve like going right back to your design system and changing a bunch of that, but it might be established by this point, and it's just very, very hard to do. So do it well from the start is what I'm saying. Invest in time and research in the early stages. Oh yeah, here we go. So consider inclusivity from the start of any design process as standard, not as an afterthought. You can't always meet everyone's needs, but trying is better than not trying.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. I think it's much better that you do something, even if you can't do everything fully. You know, as you say, do it from the start. Sometimes it's just not going to happen. But it's better to work towards it. And it's something I can be better in educating clients, which is part of, you know, why I want to bring you in to do this, so that I can not only share it with people now, but I can reference it. I'll have things that I can share with them and say, just watch this segment because it's going to explain what I mean and why it's worth doing. And then once they know, it's a lot easier for them to maintain it ongoing. Great.
Definitely. And also, just to make it clear, like, this is the direction that things are moving in now in terms of the design industry. Like, I did a bunch of user experience design qualifications recently, and Google are really hot on like accessibility. So that's the certificate I did. So it is becoming a standard thing to teach digital designers about accessibility. And so you're going to see more and more and more of it. So if your website at this point is not accessible, it's going to have to be at some point. So you might as well just start now and try and work towards that and get as close to it as possible.
Absolutely. And another way of looking at this, we help people with search engine optimization. So another way of looking at it is, if you don't necessarily care so much about the accessibility side, you'll care about the search engine side. And if you think about your search engine as just another user you need to make your website accessible for, if you can make it accessible for them, that is going to go such a long way into making sure that all your content is usable by a variety of different people. So that, I think that's often making a website well optimized for search engines is a really good start to accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something now, I've completely forgotten. But yeah, so I think the best way of concluding this would be, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. It can feel super overwhelming, accessibility stuff. You're like, where the hell do I start? But hopefully this has given you at least some starting point. There are so many resources I can point you to. You can either contact me or Ben for more information, or if you have something in particular you'd like to find out about, let one of us know and we can look into that for you. It's just trying that's the important thing here, ultimately. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Charlotte.
Pleasure.
I will make sure that obviously we're going to have this video recorded, so I'll have access to that. But I know you sent me a lot of resources after Bath Digital Festival.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're going to send some more, or you want me just to pass on those ones. Then I can make sure there's that, as well as your contact details, because if it's certainly I can only go so far, but if people really want to dive into this and need to really look at this properly, then it's worth getting someone like you in to help give that third party perspective. So I'll make sure your details are in there as well.
Excellent.
So what I do now is I always ask people to commit to action, whether they're watching live or not, but just like one thing, pick one thing that you heard Charlotte talking about and say, well, I can do that. I can improve our website from this point on. So just pick one thing, write it down, and let me know next time I speak to you. So tell your friends. So if you're interested, if you like this and many others, and you want to share it with friends, do so, please. Let everyone know how great this is, and that they want to come along. You can, if they want to come along for free, just include them on an email, and I'll make sure they're on the next session for free, so they can see what it's like, and they can get help with all of their sort of marketing stuff. Just send them over to ratherinventive.com/club. Right, thank you very much. The next session is on the 21st of December at 10 a.m., the earlier time of 10 a.m., because I'm hoping to have a special guest who's going to bring on a puppet with him. I won't say any more than that, but it's going to be a bit of a Christmas surprise if it all pans out. Otherwise, it's just going to be me again. But thank you very much. Stay in touch. You can contact me on support@ratherinventive.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. And do get in contact with Charlotte as well, who's disappeared. But I'm sure we'll all reach out to her when we need to. All right. Thank you very much. Charlotte, you're just coming back. That's all right. Just at the last minute, you just drop the mic. I'm gone.
Gone. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ben.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.